pleasure to stand before you this morning. I know that we look at world news. I know that we look at the news. Most of us do follow the news.
Yes.
Most of us do follow all of the different catastrophes that happen in our lifetime, and some of those we can look back on. Amen? And isn't it common knowledge that every time the nation and the world gets in trouble, they call on the men of God to pray? Isn't it amazing when you try to assemble at a football game and pray, or inside the school and pray? It's always politically incorrect.
Amen.
But when somebody is shooting others down, when somebody is walking into school and shooting up children, it's always time to pray.
Amen.
And I think this is nothing that starts a news, that men ought to always pray, since Johnny May has already given us that men ought to be prayed up. We talked about that, but it is ironic that every time the world gets in trouble, it's always time to pray. They always want to get the clergy together. But when everything seems to be doing good, they don't want clergy anywhere around. Even ministers from different faiths would get together in the White House and they will complain that they ought not be doing it. But every time something drastic happens, it's always to pray where you are. Amen? And so we look at this to where God says, okay, if it's okay to pray for certain situations, it ought to be okay to pray every day. You ought to be able to pray in the good times as well as the bad times. Are you with me? And so we need to understand that man did not just start doing this in the 21st century. He's been doing this ever since time was. God blessed the children of Israel, stayed with the children of Israel, led them to different lands. They turned away from him, but every time they got in trouble, they called upon the Lord. And guess what? It's good to have a tender, forgiving, all-wise God. That he gets us out of trouble every time we get sinned. Even in our personal life, we know that if it had not been for God on our side, none of us would be able to stand up and give a testimony today. Because even while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Amen? And so I'd like for you to come and go with me to see what this message is based this morning. If you'll come and go with me to the book of 2 Kings, chapter 3, and just read along with me. That's 2 Kings, Old Testament, right next to 1 Kings, Old Testament, right in now with 1st and 2nd Chronicles. But this is 2 Kings, chapter 3. Say, got it till you got it.
Got it.
All right, that sounds good. You got some Bible scholars in the house this morning. It reads on this wise. If you're not there, you can catch up with the 2 Kings, chapter 3, and it reads on this wise. Now, Jehoram, the son of Ahab, began to reign over Israel and Samaria, the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, and reigned 12 years. And he wrought evil in the sight of the Lord, but not like his father, like his mother, for he put away the image of Baal that his father had made. Nevertheless, he clave unto the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which made Israel to sin. He departed not therefrom. And Mesha, king of Moab, was a sheep master, and rendered unto the king of Israel 100,000 lambs, and 100,000 rams with the wool. But it came to pass, when Ahab was dead, that the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. And King Jehoram went out of the Samaria the same time, and numbered all Israel. And he went and sent to Jehoshaphat the king of Judah, saying, the king of Moab hath rebelled against me. Wilt thou go with me against Moab to battle? And he said, I will go up. I am as thou art, my people as thy people, and my horses as thy horses. And he says, which way shall we go up? And he answered, the way through the wilderness of Edom. So the king of Israel went, and the king of Judah, and the king of Edom. And they fetched a compass of 7 days' journey, and there was no water for the host, and for the cattle that followed them. And the king of Israel said, alas, that the Lord has called these 3 kings together, to deliver them into the hand of Moab. But Jehoshaphat said, is there not here a prophet of the Lord, that we may inquire of the Lord by him? And one of the king of Israel's servants answered and said, here is Elijah, the son of Shaphat, which poured water on the hands of Elijah. I'd like to talk to you from this thought, seeking God on somebody else's behalf.
All right.
Seeking God on somebody else's behalf.
Amen.
In other words, you can put a praying grandmother right in the middle of that.
Come on, man.
That we need to understand that here we have three kings that God has placed, and even Jehoram is a person that follows Ahab and Jezebel. The Bible clearly says that he wasn't a saint. That he put away Baal, the groves and different things, but he held on to the traditions that was sinful to make the people sin. Yes. So you have to understand, so goes the king, so goes the people. Let me see if I can bring it home to you. So goes the pastor, so goes the church. Amen, lights. You don't have to agree with me here. But the thing about it, that people watch, and the leader is the one who signals that it's okay to do certain things. And here we have a leader who knows better. Yeah. So somebody just, I don't know, is the mic on? It's not on? I've got it cut on. We'll use the other one. Just a minute. You see, all the things that can go wrong, will go wrong. Yeah. But Satan is a lie. That's right. The truth ain't in it. And he can't stop at nothing. He can't stop this train this morning. Amen. 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 So here we just had somebody in her talk says, if you know to do good and you don't do it, it's a sin. So if you're a king and you know to do good, why aren't you doing it? But this is where the text ends here. Here is a guy who takes over. He looks and sees that his father and his mother were sinful, and they met a drastic end from God. And yet he still wants to sin. And here, now you need to pick up on this. Here it is, a person who is sinning, but God has put him there. You missed that. He's sinning, but God put him there. Because if God did not want him there, he never would have followed his mother or father. But God put him there for a purpose, and the purpose is to teach us a lesson this morning. Let me see if I can make it plain for you. Just because God goes along with you don't mean that he stamps what you're doing. All of us are sinners saved by grace. And none can point the finger at one another. Just because God has not chastised you don't mean that he can't use you. Okay, I wish I had somebody to go with me here. Because see, all you got to do is inject ourselves in there. A lot of stuff that we're doing, God is not approving of it, but he's a graceful God, and he allows us to achieve some things. Maybe you'll get this on the way home. You have to understand that we have a king who God has allowed to reign. God has given him a chance to get himself together. And yet he chooses to cause the people of God to sin. And so it goes on that he's not right himself. And it says it's easy to see the little body smoke in your brother's eye. But we can't pick up the 2x4 that's in ours. We need to understand that when the king of Moab rebels against Israel, Israel is getting thousands of pounds of wool and meat from this Moab. He's paying because of God set this on him, and he says, well, since Ahab died and he was a mean cat, I'm just going to stop paying. You know how it is when we have a debt and we feel that we just don't want to pay it no more. We get bold and hang up on the folk. We know they're older and says, well, I'm not going to worry about it. He's soft. He ain't going to ever. You ever seen somebody who rents out a house, and when you get somebody, they don't want to pay it. They just rebel. I'm having a bad time. Just because you're having a bad time don't mean that you can cut somebody off. Agreement is an agreement.
and you ought to stand by it. But here the king of Moab says, well, it got Junior on the throne. Sometimes they always look at Junior and just Junior is sweet. But the thing about it is that Junior's got a little bit of sense that he knows that if he consults the other three kings, I'm not going up against the king of Moab by myself. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask two other kings to go along with me. If one is good and two is better, then three kings got to be great against one. And so here Jehoram decides, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to ask Jehoshaphat, the king of Israel, to come and go with him. You have to understand that they were the divide there between the house of Judah and the house of Israel. Jehoshaphat was the king of Judah. You have to understand that they went separate ways because God saw what some of the people were doing, and so he was blessing one side of the nation, and the other one was about to be in ruin. And so we have to understand that God allowed him to go and entreat himself to Jehoshaphat. And so Jehoshaphat says, well, I tell you what, Jehoshaphat really didn't want to get into this. But he says, your people are as my people. Yeah. Your horses are like my horses, so we in this thing together. Now, really, to tell you the truth, he had no business allying himself with some king who's doing wrong. The first point, you better be careful who you ally with. That's A-L-L-Y. You better make sure who you make a treaty with. Because people who don't know God and people who don't respect God can cause you some embarrassment along the way. Go out with somebody that really don't know the Lord, and you at a spiritual or religious setting, and see how they can embarrass you. You need to understand that here it is, one king that is sinning goes to another king who's minding his own business. And so it says that here it is. He says, the king of Moab hath rebelled against me. Will thou go with me against Moab to battle? And he said, I will go up. I'm with you. I'm as you are. My people are as your people, and my horses as their horses. And he said, which way should we go up? And he answered, the way through the wilderness of Edom. Jehoshaphat didn't even have to answer this. But this is what happens when you consult God. Here it is that he is a great king, and yet they asked him. But one thing Jehoshaphat did know, he did know the Lord. And so he talked about his wisdom, and it's good that Jehoram did consult a man of God. It's good that he did lean. He knew he wasn't right. So he says, I'll get Jehoshaphat. Isn't it amazing how when folk are facing trials and tribulation, they always want somebody spiritual to ride with them? Hello, lights. I'm getting ready to go to Timbuktu. Can you pray for me? We always want somebody to get a word for. Can you talk to him for me? You ought to be talking to him for yourself. You ought to be praying to him for yourself. We just heard you don't need a priest to pray for you. It's good to have a conglomerate of prayer. It's always good to have a community of prayer. But honey, the first somebody to pray ought to be you. Amen. That's if you can get a word through. That's right. Now, if you ain't talked to him in a long time, you better throw your hat in the door to make sure he knows you. Yeah, he might throw it back. Sometimes I think that we take God for granted. We hook and crook and do things all week long. We don't talk to him, but as soon as we get in trouble, we want the preacher or the deacon or the nurse's aide or pray for me. That's what's going on right here. Jehoshaphat, you know the Lord. I know I don't know him like you know him. So honey, if anybody can get a word through, it ought to be you. So we need to understand that Jehoshaphat did not consult. You would have thought that as wise as Jehoshaphat would, he would not have entreated himself with a non-righteous king. Why do we hang with folk who don't mean us no good? Well, why do we entreat ourselves with folk who don't know anything about the Lord? Oh, I know we say that we're trying to teach them and we're trying to hang around long enough. Some folk am not worthy of your hanging. Let me explain it to you. Because they have no intention of changing or listening to you about an all-wise God. They think they can do it all by themselves. But here it is. Jehoshaphat decided to go ahead on and go with him. And so we need to understand, we need to understand that God is watching us. And just because we're in leadership don't mean that God will give us or speak to us in wisdom just when we want him to speak to us. Sometimes you got to wait on the Lord to get a sense of direction. We need to understand that here they are. That Jehoshaphat says we ought to go by the wilderness. In other words, we can get around Moab. We can get around them and they won't even know we're coming. It says the king of Israel went and the king of Judah and the king of Edom, and they fetched a compass of 7 days. In other words, they laid down and they mapped up the road through the wilderness that will take 7 days journey. And here their plan of travel had no water. Isn't that amazing? You got thousands of folk who are going to battle. They've got spears and they've got weaponry. They got armor. They got armor bearers, but they ain't got no water. That's like heading out on a camping trip and you in the desert without any water. And here they should have known better. You know why? I'm glad you asked me. Because Moses, in the same wilderness, had to get water from a rock. They should have already known this. That you don't travel in this area without extra water. You don't travel this road of religion and God's thing on earth without spiritually being filled first. Because, honey, somebody hurt your feeling along the way. Some church person will turn you around. You better be filled with the living water. Like Jesus says at the well with the Samaritan woman, I've got some water that if you drink, you'll thirst no more. But this earthly water, guess what? You'll keep on thirsting. But here it is. You got 3 kings. Neither one of them got sense enough to plan for water. Do you know that if they did not have water, or they do not have water, it leaves you weak? You can make it a couple of weeks without food. A person like me might be able to live a month. But you can't live without water. I'm just laying it on the line for you. Skinny people might die first. It has a privilege to be fat sometimes. And I'm just being honest because the body normally eats up the fat first. So it's got something to eat on. Amen? If you kind of skinny, you might not have too much to eat on. You better get some food real quick. But here it is that the water is necessary for life. If you don't have water, you have no life. And so we need to understand that all of these great kings, since the Lord didn't even plan for a canteen of water, and that wouldn't have done it. But they repeated the same thing that Moses had to deal with in this same wilderness. And it caused Moses to lose his place in the promised land. Simply because God told him to speak to the rock, and he hit the rock. See, this is a parallel lesson that God will still answer your prayer even when you're doing wrong. Because he knew that he's supposed to speak to the rock. He hit the rock, but God looked beyond Moses and saw the need of water for his people. And so we need to understand that they're in trouble, and somebody said, oh, we made a grave mistake. Our plan and pathway was all right. It looked good on paper. It looked good when we were drawing it up. But now we in the desert and we ain't got no water. Man, somebody messed up. Well, it had to be 3 of us because all 3 of us drew up the plan. So who are we going to blame it on? I just can imagine them sitting there. Well, you were supposed to take care of the water. You were supposed to take care of the provision. And they said, no, somebody else. I gave it to JoJo. JoJo didn't come through. traveling this spiritual road, we've got to be ready. We've got to be ready, and we've got to have all the provisions. We've got to put on the whole armor of God. And we've got to be spiritually filled in order to win on the other side. Now here it is. Here it is. Here it is. So now that they're in trouble, guess who they call on? Now, is it anybody here? Hey, holler down through the camp. Is it anybody here that knows the Lord? Is it anybody here we can consult? Now, we didn't call him when we made the plan. We didn't call him when we made the decision. But, we need him now. We're out here with water. And if we're going to make it, God's going to have to work a miracle, because at that time there were no water trucks. There were no water pipes. So they knew they had made a great error in their planning. When you plan for God, make sure he's in the plan. Make sure you've consulted him before you make a move. Hello, David. Before you move the ark, you ought to talk to me first. You ought to ask me how I want you to move it. You ought to ask me what you need to do prior to moving it. See, a lot of times we get into trouble is we don't consult God. You know who we consult? We consult ourselves. And ourselves mess ourselves up. I know there's a lot of double talking, but it makes a lot of sense. That when we consult ourselves and we say to self, it's all right. Man, you're looking good. You know how we used to do on Fridays when the eagle flew? You're too young to understand. When the eagle flies, that's when you got your paycheck. And you sit at work and you had your list. Well, I'm going to go by the liquor store. And I'm going to get my ride drink. Come on, some of you always want to say, come on and go with me. Yeah? I know I'm not the only one that used to do that. And I'm going to go buy the clothes clean, and I'm going to get my front out. Your front was what you put on. You understand? I'm talking a different lingo. Y'all, it's your clothing. You know, you go by and get it out of the clothing, and then you go home and take your quick bath, check on the 5 o'clock news, and then you were ready to go out into the world. You remember that Chico, don't you? I know that's right. I used to hang out there with Chico, but we never did anything wrong. We just hung out together. We know how these things work. And you had all of that planned, and then the shooting got to be shooting. And all of the plans went right down the pipe because we did not consult God. Are you with me here? But here these kings are in trouble, and now they're seeking the man of God. Now, you know how I parallel that? Remember how we dodged bullets? Remember how we dodged trouble? And Sunday morning, we couldn't wait until the church opened. We need to understand that it's a common thing. When we mess up, we seek God. Are you with me here? I'm almost through with this. But here it is that they decide to at least have sense enough. Jehoshaphat, being the man of God, says, yep, that's somebody here.
Yes, sir.
Now, we don't know why Elijah got himself mixed up in this. He is not here in the line of a priest. The text does not show that. He has not been set on special commission. It does not say that in the text. But isn't it amazing how God will infuse somebody you need in life along the road? Hello, grandmama. Hello, neighbor next door. Hello, man that will get you out of trouble and give you some wisdom in times of trouble. So here, Jehoshaphat knows that Elijah is in the mix. And so he says, yes, there's one. Elijah is the man who poured water on Elijah.
Yes, he did.
In other words, he's the servant of this most high prophet. And if anybody knows the Lord, he ought to know the Lord. Somewhere Jehoshaphat has watched Elijah do his thing with the Lord. Isn't it amazing and isn't it wonderful to know somebody that knows Jesus? Isn't it amazing and wonderful to know somebody that you see their life change and it's all dedicated in the Lord? Blessed is the man who walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor sit in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, in which he meditates both day and night. Evidently, Jehoshaphat had saw Elijah praying to God. Because see, most prophets, Jewish prophets, prayed at least 3 times a day. Some kind of way he saw him. You need to seek out somebody that knows the Lord. You've heard of praying partners, but look how Elijah handles this. Jeroboam is a sinning king. So he comes, and they all decide to go to three of them together, and that's good. Brother Paul, they decided, since we got this alliance and since we all messed up, let's all go talk to the man of God. But Jehoram is the one who started all this mess. He got the other 2 kings in it. They being loyal went in there with him. And so he goes to the man of God, and he says to him, can you help us? And he says, oh no. Go back to where you came from. What am I going to do for you? You wouldn't listen to me when I was preaching. You didn't listen to God's prophets. So why you want to come to me now? Don't you ever feel like that every now and then when you got somebody whom you're trying to help? They spend all their money on fast living. They've done everything under the sun they could do. And when they're in need, here they come. Don't you feel like just throwing up your hand? Brother Terrell, don't you feel like when folk come and tell you, I think it's the church's duty, they sure can tell you the church's duty to get them out of trouble that they got themselves in. Don't you feel like just telling them, be there for me? Amen. You ain't been helping us all this long, but we can't do that. That's the key to God's love. You can't do that. And Elijah proved us to it that even though he got in their faces, go back to Baal where you've been going. Go back to all that sinning that you've been doing. Go ask some of your no good sinful friends to help you out. But he says, just because of Jehoshaphat, just because Jehoshaphat is here, I'm going to go ahead and help you out. It's good to have somebody that knows the Lord. It's good to have somebody in your corner who can put a word in for you. It's good to have somebody who can talk to Jesus just for you. I know that we know that we're praying people and we know that we can get a prayer through, but it's good to have that extra prayer. It's good to have somebody that has a relationship with the Lord, and you know they have the relationship that they can put a word in for you. You know how some of us back in the old day, Brother Penrice, when we saw a pretty girl, we're not as forward as these young people are nowadays. But when we saw somebody looking good, if we knew there was a friend, if they was in college, you say, Sister Malia, can you put a word in for me? I kind of like her. Can you put a word in for me? This is what they're asking. They're asking Elijah to do. Can you put a word in for us? We messed up. We've got thousands and hundreds of thousands of men out here almost to die. Can you help us out? And Elijah is mad with them because he says you hadn't been listening all this time. And if you would have consulted God, you wouldn't have been in this predicament. But guess what? You thought you could do it all by yourself. Honey, listen to this. Without God, you can do nothing. If God is not in the plan, you're just wasting your time. They thought because they were king, and they would say go, and people would go. And they say come, and people would come. And they say die, and folk would die. Say live, and folk would live. They thought that they had it all going on. But honey, I don't care what position you are. I don't know where you are in life. But if God is not with you, you can't conquer anything. You can't even lead anything. It's right here in the text. So they're asking him, if you please. I'm pretty sure, Brother Woodflock, they were saying, pretty please. And if you're kindly, we'll do so. We don't know what we can pay you, but can you get us out of this situation? You know how we used to do when Daddy was ready to whip us and we entreated Mama. Mama, can you say a word for me? Can you entreat for me one time? Can you let him know I won't do it anymore? But here they're at this point. And Elijah could have easily walked away. And you know what, as Christians, we could easily walk away from the folk that are asking us to pray for. But you know what? That's not God's way. And he proves this to us in the text that he talks to Elijah, and he asked him that he would help them out. Now look at Elijah. Now, if you don't think, and this is what I like about God's words. So you really got to study God's words. Because if you read in between the lines, Elijah is peed off. Oh yeah, I can say that. Because he tells them to go back where they are. Yeah, he's mad. He is so upset that he wants them out of his face. And then he says, well, since, Lord, you want me to help him, you better calm me down. I need a little minstrel. I need a bell Zion choir right about now. To some old 100s that will calm me back down. Because if you're down, Lord, I'm going to mess up all over again. If you don't calm me down, I might say a curse word or two that they haven't been used to me saying. You need to calm me down. Isn't it amazing how music calm you down? I'm not talking about all this bang, bang, boom, boom stuff when you're going down the road. But good old 100 music. That's what I like about those old hymns and those old 100s. They calm you down. They make you think about the goodness of the Lord. And I'm pretty sure Elijah thought about a lot of times in his life that he had messed up, but God had allowed him to go on. And so when the minstrels sang, now these wasn't just anybody. These were well-trained, like bells and choir members. They come to practice every now and then. You missed that. That they sang with the Spirit. And it says that they calmed him down. So they did their job. Bells and you doing a wonderful job. And the thing is that they calmed him down, that he was able to talk to the Lord. Do you know that you can't talk to the Lord when you're angry? In John, Jesus is trying to help the people. And there's so much commotion going on that the text says in John, that he just walked away. If Jesus has problems as man and God getting the word of stiff-necked folk, what do you think about those of us who are trying to preach and teach every day? You need to understand that some folk will nerve you up so much that you really have to pray to God first to get you right so that you can pray right. Now maybe that don't make no sense. But you can start off praying wrong. That's right. And so here it is that here's a word from the Lord. Now look at this. Look at this. God gets him out of another jam. The man of God gets him out of another jam. Remember, they've got hundreds of thousands of soldiers out there with no water. They don't have no answer to the problem. Elijah talks to God on somebody else's behalf. Sinners as well as Christians. You get that? He talks to God on the behalf of everybody involved. And he gives them a plan. He says, now I know that Elijah got water from a cloud and it flooded the streets. I might not be able to do what Elijah did, but I know that my God will still supply. Somebody missed that. I might not be able to do it through the same way that my predecessor did, but I serve the same God. All I'm trying to tell you is what God has done in the past, he can do the same things right now. What God has done in the past, he can do in the future. We serve an awesome God. And so he still reigns. And so God tells Elijah to tell the king to dig some ditches. And I can just see us. Out here in this dry, arid, it's too hot out here. You brought us out here to die, and now I didn't come out here and sign up to dig no ditches. I don't know what, they done lost their mind. Here it is out in a dry desert. I'm sweating like a Hebrew slave. I just don't understand why they're doing that. But I'm going to go ahead and dig the ditch anyway. Ain't nothing going to happen. We need to understand, for those of us who seek blessings from God, got to make room for them. God don't say how to do it or when to do it, but he will let you know what to do. You need to understand that this man of God is laying out a plan for him. You brought him out here, but God's going to rescue him. Go ahead and dig some ditches. This is all I'm trying to tell you, Brother James. It's like this. There was this church who was in a dry and arid place. And the preacher, it was so hot that everything, the crops was dying and people were dying, and the minister called a church meeting and he says, we all are going to have to pray. He says, what we're going to do is we're going to get together tomorrow and we're going to pray for rain. We're going to pray that God will give us some rain. And so they got together, and here comes Sister Sally. And she's got a parasol draped across her shoulder. She's the only one that has faith enough to bring an umbrella. And somebody in the crowd asked her, why are you carrying an umbrella? She said, if my notes serve me right, somebody said we was going to pray for rain. You got to believe that God will do exactly what he said he'll do. You've got to prepare for God's blessing. And here it is that God sent rain from under the earth. The deep mountains open up and fill the trenches. To Moab, it looked like blood running down in the valley. So they said, hey, man, these cats are slaying folk all over the place. That the river of blood is flowing in the valley. We have no chance. And God brought the victory. Some way, somehow, God will make a way. You might not see it, but God will make a way. Over 2,000 years ago, there was some man that put a word in for us. We were sinning. We were lost to sin. We had no way out, but Jesus the Christ put a word in for us. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. 2,000 years ago, a man laid down his life for us. While we were yet sinners, he died for us, buried for us. But early Sunday morning, the text says, he got up with all power in heaven and earth in his hands. Isn't it good to have a God who can put a word in for you? Isn't it good to serve a master who knows just what you need? When you in dry and arid places, if you need a drink, call on Jesus. He's the master of the sea. He can say to the winds and waves, peace, be still. Open up the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing. Isn't God all right? He's all right with me. In fact, I have to concur with the songwriter, can't nobody do me like Jesus. When I'm thirsty, he gives me drink. When I'm lonely, he comforts me. When I'm tired, he gives me strength. You need to understand that there's nobody like the lowly Jesus that able to give you water from the living well. So it's okay. It's all right. Newsflash, it's all right to speak for somebody else. Because somebody along the way, Sister Davis prayed for us. I got somebody sitting right there. I got somebody sitting right here. I got another person over there. And guess what? Guess what, Sister Johnson? They didn't just pray for us. They prayed for everybody in the neighborhood. When we were too dumb to pray for ourselves, we had somebody praying for us. So it's all right to speak on behalf. That's what Christians ought to do. If they ask you to pray for them, pray for them. I don't care if they the darkest sinner in the land. Pray for them. Every now and then hold them. Let them know that you're a representative of the Most High. You're not the judge and the jury. You just as ambassadors. And ambassadors know how to pray. We need to understand every now and then it's good to know that there's somebody in the crowd who knows Jesus. Now here it is. You in the crowd. Do you really know Jesus? Do you really know who he is? Have you really walked with him? Have you really tried him? Do you really believe in him? He is my all in all. Not only is he my water, he's my bridge over troubled waters. God bless your heart. The world gets in trouble, but God, man, gets you out. Isn't that all right? Call Obama and tell him that if you have problems, just call on Jesus.
At this time, the privilege is extended to any and all who may recognize that they're out of God's ark of safety. If you'd like to establish a relationship with the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, you may approach his altar at this time. You may come by letter, you may come by Christian experience, you may come to rededicate your faith, you may come as a candidate for baptism. The motto here at this church is, whosoever will, let him or her come. Will you come today?